Well, good morning, Creekside. It is always good to be here and to see so many friends. So my name is Nate Millheim. Some of you I know really well. Some of you I've never seen before in my life, and you're wondering who this guy is. But my name is Nate Millheim. Years ago, I was a youth pastor here at Creekside in the early 2000s when I was younger, way back. I currently, don't make fun of me, Wayne. Currently, I started a ministry in East Oakland about I think almost 9 years ago now. So my wife and I started something called Oakland Leadership Center, and we work with young men, 18 to 25, doing mentoring and discipleship and developing leaders in what is a neighborhood that is going through a lot in East Oakland. So that's what we do. But I always love to come visit and to hang out and say hi to friends who are kind to us and generous to us and give me a big hug. So it's good to be here. This morning is a little different. I love to start off preaching by saying something a little bit funny, kind of take the edge off a little bit. I kind of breathe, right? We all kind of breathe. I say something a little cute and funny, or I try at least, or I make fun of Doug, which usually works. But this morning, we're looking at the book of Lamentations this week and next week. And the hard thing about preaching Lamentations, and I think the hard thing about looking at Lamentations or thinking about reading Lamentations, it's not fun. You know, it's not light, it's not fun, it doesn't lend itself to cute jokes. And I don't know if you're like me, but I like to be happy. Like, I like to smile. You know, I like sun. I like sun more than rain. I like the summer more than the winter, okay? I like it when my 3 kids get along and there's no conflict, right? I like it when my family has no conflict. Right? I like it when the in-laws have no conflict. I like peace. I like to laugh with friends. I like to smile with friends. I like to see the glass half full. Right? I like to be happy. Is anyone with me? And I like to see friends, and I like it when everybody's doing fine and everyone's job is fine and everyone has enough money, right? And we're all getting along and things are okay and we can just smile and, right, go to Pete's Coffee and say, "Hi, how you doing?" "I'm great." "I'm good. How are you?" "I'm great." It's good, right? Like, I kind of like that. But that's not life, is it? It's not life. Even if we would like that to be life, like I think I would sometimes, that's not real life. Real life is not always, "I'm great, hey, I'm great, and you're great, and everything's fine, and it's sunny outside, and it's 78 degrees. That's not our reality, is it? That's not the real life that we face on this planet Earth. Real life is hard, isn't it? Real life is confusing. Real life is painful. Real life has division and arguments, small arguments and huge global arguments and division. Real life has death. Real life has sickness. Real life has wars. Real life has violence. This is the real life that we live in. This is our planet Earth. Even if we wish it wasn't that way, this is our planet Earth. And sometimes we might even long for, like, in our culture, like the 1950s, Leave It to Beaver. Sometimes we look back and say, "Oh, but at some point it was better. At some point, right? At some point everybody was morally sound and everything was happy." And then you watch Mad Men and realize, no, it wasn't, right? There was depression and anxiety and alcoholism, and, right? That's the real story. And actually, if you look at history, I was talking to an older friend of mine about this, and he said, you know, a lot of people are saying, "Oh no, the world is messed up right now," right? Like, we're all angry with each other, and there's wars, and it's a special time. He started laughing, and he said, "It's always been like this. Like, lift up the news report from 1980 or 1960 or 1940 or 1920. There were terrible things happening, right? Drama and pain and agony and division. From the Garden of Eden, right? From the Garden of Eden to Israel trying to trust God and not trusting God, and kings and prophets and wars. And imagine David running through the wilderness, hiding in caves, right? All the way up to prophets not being heard and Israel going through turmoil, to Jesus not being heard and respected by leaders and being killed, to the early Christians being persecuted. This narrative, the story that we have is full of real pain, right? real circumstances. And there is joy, and at some point in Lamentations, we'll get a little glimmer of the hope and the joy and the goodness and the faith and the trust we can have in God. But it's mostly 5 chapters of verse after verse after verse of trying to communicate and cry out about the pain that some people have experienced. And through poetry, song, verse after verse, trying to cry out and say, here's what happened, someone hear us. This is what happened to us. So, to set the scene, we're going to read Lamentations chapter 1 in a few minutes, and I want to feel that weight. But to set the scene, and if you want to go ahead and turn to Lamentations chapter 1 right now, you can. But I'm hoping when we read it in a few minutes, maybe just go ahead and find it now. We read it in a few minutes, you'll be able to read it in your Bible. But I want to give a little preview of why Lamentations was written. It wasn't written in a vacuum. It's a part of this narrative, the story of God. And what led up to Lamentations being written was around 588, 587 BC. Who's ever heard of King Nebuchadnezzar? I bet a lot of kids in here have heard of Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But Nebuchadnezzar was a powerful king of Babylon. And Babylon was a powerful empire. And Babylon was getting more and more powerful back in this time period. And eventually Jerusalem was destroyed. Eventually some big, terrible things happened to Judah and Jerusalem. But what had happened leading up to this was the kingdom was split. So there was the northern kingdom, and there was the southern kingdom. And the northern kingdom, a few chapters back, it actually happened in 2 Kings, if you want to read it, 2 Kings 24 and 25. Israel is already off the map, the northern kingdom. They're already done. They have not followed God. They have had utter turmoil and bad leadership, and they're basically done, gone, out of the picture. And now you have Judah. And Judah, the southern kingdom, was small, but they did have something important, which was Jerusalem, which was a holy city, right? I mean, a beautiful, holy city. A big part of the narrative of Scripture is this Jerusalem and the temple being built and all that Jerusalem meant to the people. So they still had their capital, and they had Jerusalem. But meanwhile, Judah was a fairly small kingdom, okay? A fairly small, humble kingdom in the big with Assyria and Babylon and those things coming in. And they were coming in, and then years after years, Judah had to figure out, how do we deal with these big kingdoms? Do we just do whatever they say? Do we kind of let them rule? Do we let them appoint rulers? How do we navigate this? Meanwhile, Judah kept sinning against God. They kept praising idols. They kept treating people poorly in their own land. They had prophets like Jeremiah. Who's heard of Jeremiah? He has a whole book right before Lamentations. And Jeremiah kept telling the kings and kept telling the people, you've got to stop these ways. You're doing things wrong. You have to stop. You have to come back to God, or bad things are going to happen. And they didn't listen, and the kings didn't listen. And Jeremiah also told them, hey, you just have to do whatever Babylon says. You can't, don't try to make other little alliances with little kingdoms. You just have to submit for now. I know you don't want to, but Babylon's too big. Just do what they say for now. That's what's best for Judah. But the king didn't want to. And so in 2 Kings 25, it's on the slide, here's what happened. This is the very beginning of chapter 25 of 2 Kings. Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. I want to point out, Zedekiah was 21. Okay, I don't let a 21-year-old drive my car, right? So Zedekiah is the king of Judah, and Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Not smart, and he was warned. And in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came with all his army against Jerusalem and laid siege to it. They built siege works against it all around. So the city was besieged until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. Now, I'm not great at math, but this was not like a day battle, right? Do you see that? This was not like a week battle. This was not a month of turmoil. This was over a year of this incredibly powerful army coming to the special city of what is left of what was Israel, what is left of Judah, coming to this city and putting a huge siege works around it with all of their forces. And over the course of month after month after month, they came in. And people died, and people tried to escape. Some people were marched off to foreign lands. There was famine. They were out of water. They were out of food. And eventually had to see the temple torn down piece by piece, right? Month after month after month of utter and total destruction to your family, to your children, to your cousins, to your infrastructure, to the city that was so important to your worship and your idea of God, to see this city that you trusted in, the temple, to see it completely come down as a foreign army just decimated your whole culture, your everything. And you left, or you died, or you hid for a while, month after month after month. So, we're going to read Lamentations 1 in a minute. Before that, I want to tell you a couple notes to help you understand it, okay? The first one is, this is written as an acrostic. And if any of you speak Hebrew, you could read it in Hebrew and it'd be really cool. But most of us don't. So, but it's an acrostic. So there are 22 verses in chapters 1, 2, 4, and 5. Okay? And in 1, 2, and 4, the 22 verses, the first verse starts with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Second verse starts with the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So it's an acrostic. And so the verses are important. 22 verses, 66 in the middle, chapter 3, and then 22, 22. Okay? It's also written in a poetic way. This is not history. So 2 Kings has a brutal history. So you can read 2 Kings 24 and 25, and it's this king did this, this happened, this happened, this happened. Lamentations is a people crying out in a creative way, right? It's the people writing a song in the middle of war, right? It's the people writing a song or a poem and trying to express what they're going through so that someone will listen, okay? So it's poetic, it's creative, it's word pictures, it's imagery, it's raw emotion. And I was thinking about this when I looked at my notes this morning. The lamentation is written, and we'll get into this later, so that someone will hear what's happening to me. Part of a lament is, somebody look at what's happening to me. Will someone see what is happening to me right now? Someone see my suffering. Have you ever felt like that? Like, does anybody see what I'm going through right now? Can someone please see? So there's something beautiful and poetic that so many years later, these people that went through this, we're sitting here in a church, and we are listening to what they went through, right? Them that wrote these songs so that someone would know what they were going through. And now we, in this faith tradition, are looking at what they went through. I think there's something of solidarity or beautiful in that we are listening to their cries today, so many years later. But it's a poem. Other thing is, it talks of Jerusalem as a woman or as she. Okay, so if you fall asleep when we're reading the chapter and you wake up and we say she, we're talking about Jerusalem as a woman, represented as a woman, going through these hard things. So in chapter 1 also, the first half is as if you were sitting next to the woman and you're observing what she's going through. The second half, there's a switch of narration, and all of a sudden it's as the woman speaking. It's like you're watching, but then somehow you can't take it anymore. And so the author started writing it from the voice of Jerusalem, saying, here's what I'm going through. I'm talking now about what I have gone through, about the pain that I feel. Okay? So as we read this, I normally don't read a whole chapter because I'm worried people are going to phase out after 6 or 7 verses. But I want to read this chapter, and I'm hoping that we can feel the weight of the pain, okay? I'm hoping that we can feel the weight of someone who wrote this who has gone through horrible tragedy. And they're trying to voice in a poem, here's what I am going through. Here's what it feels like. Someone listen to what I'm going through. So please try to feel it as we read these 22 verses. So please do grab a Bible. It's not on the screen. So please do grab a Bible. And I'm going to read 1 through 22. How lonely sits the city that was once full of people. How like a widow she has become, she that was great among the nations. She that was a princess among the provinces has become a vassal. She weeps bitterly in the night with tears on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has no one to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They have become her enemies. Judah has gone into exile with suffering and hard servitude. She lives now among the nations and finds no resting place. Her pursuers have all overtaken her in the midst of her distress. The roads to Zion mourn, for no one comes to the festivals. All her gates are desolate. Her priests groan. This word groan will come up a lot. Her young girls grieve, and her lot is bitter. Her foes have become the masters. Her enemies prosper, because the Lord has made her suffer for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children have gone away, captives before the foe. From daughter Zion has departed all her majesty. Her princes have become like stags that find no pasture. They fled without strength before the pursuer. Jerusalem remembers, in the days of her affliction and wandering, all the precious things that were hers in days of old. When her people fell into the hand of the foe and there was no one to help her, the foe looked on, mocking over her downfall. Jerusalem sinned grievously, so she has become a mockery. All who honored her despise her, for they have seen her nakedness. She herself groans and turns her face away. Her uncleanness was in her skirts. She took no thought of her future. Her downfall was appalling, with no one to comfort her. O Lord, look at my affliction, for the enemy has triumphed. Enemies have stretched out their hands over all her precious things. She has even seen the nations invade her sanctuary, those whom you forbade to enter your congregation. All her people groan as they search for bread. They trade their treasures for food to revive their strength. Look, O Lord. This phrase comes up again. Look, O Lord, and see how worthless I have become. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which was brought upon me, which the Lord inflicted on the day of his fierce anger. From on high he sent fire. It went deep into my bones. He spread a net for my feet. He turned me back. He has left me stunned, faint all day long. My transgressions were bound into a yoke. By his hand they were fastened together. They weigh on my neck, sapping my strength. The Lord handed me over to those whom I cannot withstand. The Lord has rejected all my warriors in the midst of me. He proclaimed a time against me to crush my young men. The Lord has trodden as in a winepress the virgin daughter Judah. For these things I weep. I weep. My eyes flow with tears, for a comforter is far from me, one to revive my courage. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. Zion stretches out her hands, but there is no one to comfort her. The Lord has commanded against Jacob that his neighbors should become his foes. Jerusalem has become a filthy thing among them. The Lord is in the right, for I have rebelled against his word. But hear, all you peoples, and behold my suffering. My young women and young men have gone into captivity. I called to my lovers, but they deceived me. My priests and elders perished in the city while seeking food to revive their strength. See, O Lord, how distressed I am. My stomach churns, my heart is wrung within me, because I have been very rebellious. In the street the sword bereaves, in the house it is like death. They heard how I was groaning, with no one to comfort me. All my enemies heard of my trouble. They are glad that you have done it. Bring on the day you have announced, and let them be as I am. Let all their evil come before you, and deal with them as you have dealt with me, because of all my transgressions. For my groans are many, and my heart is faint. My groans are many, and my heart is faint. Have you ever felt like that? My groans are many, and my heart is faint. We'll look at a few phrases that come out. And my hope in these 2 weeks is not just that we will learn some of the history or what they went through, but that we would be encouraged to practice lament ourselves, to be able to face the pain and to be able to practice lament for ourselves and for our families and for our neighborhoods and for our cities and for our world, that we would learn, how did they practice lament? For 5 chapters they wrote down lament, and it was handed down through generations as a part of this, as an integral part of this story. So my hope is we would see, how did they lament, and that we would use it as we face the pain and as we lament ourselves. So several times this phrase comes up, or a similar phrase, there is no one to comfort. Did you notice that? There's no one here. There's no one to comfort me. This comes up over and over again. The woman in Jerusalem is saying, there's nobody, no one to comfort me. Is anybody looking? Is anybody listening? There's no one there for me anymore. Both as an individual person, you get that feeling, and as a corporate sense, as a city, they're saying, there's nobody here. There's no one to comfort me. I wish that somebody was here. I wish that somebody was with me in this. Have you ever felt like that? Like, I wish that there was somebody else with their hand out right now. I need that right now. They're saying there's nobody here. The second thing, and these are on the slide, is groaning. It comes up over and over again in Lamentations. The idea of groaning. This is central to lament, okay? If we want to learn how to lament, there is groaning. Now, groaning's a funny thing because I think of groaning if somebody is hurt badly, like on a football field, and before you can talk, you groan for a minute, right? Or if you were in a war and you're hurt and you groan, but you also groan with words. The Hebrews, when they were enslaved in Egypt, it says they groaned and God heard them. God heard their groans to God. But a groan it's verbal, but it's also from your gut. You know what I mean? It's from somewhere inside of you, a groan out to someone, a groan out to God. This is lament, to let ourselves groan out loud. Some years ago, I was doing work ministry with a friend, and he wrote a prayer of lament. And it was a call and response. He would read a line, and then people around us would read, and they would say, he would describe some prayers of grief to God, and then we would respond, Lord, together we groan. And then he said, and then we're all going to groan together, like actually groan. So the first time he showed it to me, like, I get it, but I don't want to groan. That's weird. It just sounds like, I'm not into, like, I'm kind of introverted. I don't want to groan out loud. But it was beautiful. And so we started doing it with groups of people or churches. And at first, everybody in the crowd would think, okay, and they would kind of do it. And by the second or third time, you would have this deep sense of the spirit and solidarity in people letting out their pain together, right? Like, whether it's a small group or a church, like letting out, yeah, we do have pain. And we are groaning, like verbally groaning together. And every time, this sense would come over the room of, we all need to groan. And right now we're groaning together in this moment. And every time it was beautiful and deep. We would groan together. But groaning to God, to someone, to hear us is a part of lament. Letting ourselves groan. Next thing that's repeated is this word all. And in their context, they really were, all is a good word because they were losing everything. Everything. Sometimes we go through moments where we do lose a lot. All of something, or it feels like we're losing everything. But in their situation, it's all. Everything's gone. Everything's done. It's all bad. It's all gone. And then the final thing which is so central to lament is look, Lord. Did you catch that? Over and over again, lament is facing this pain and saying, look, Lord. You ever felt that? You're facing something. It's like, no, God, are you seeing this? Are you seeing what we're going through, God? Like, are you aware, God, that this is happening to me right now? Does anyone see it? Look, Lord. I was talking to a young man this week who just got out of jail, and he doesn't have a lot of options. There's not a lot there, right? And his block is all bad. And it's like, God, do you see this? Like, do you see this, God? Can you look, God, can you at least look, please? This is not working. Can you look at this pain, God? Please, look at it. But lament is crying out and saying, I don't know but God, can you at least look? And that's okay to do. Say, God, look, please. Look at us. We're going through this. Please look, Lord. Now, I normally never like to read a whole chapter because I'm afraid you'll fall asleep. I also don't like to read a whole paragraph from a book that I read because it just sounds like a bad idea that you're all going to fall asleep. But I kept going back to this one paragraph in this commentary I read on Lamentations, and it just put it all into words for me. And I kept coming back, so I'm going to read it to you. Can you track with me, please? A whole paragraph it's a little wordy, but it really just put into words what I was trying to figure out about lamenting and Lamentations, okay? It's by Christopher Wright. This is so good. I wish I could write like this. He says about Lamentations, when people with faith in God experience or witness the realities of injustice, oppression, violence, lying, and all the suffering they cause, they cry out to God in protest. Why do such things happen? It is important to recognize that such protest is not in itself blaming God for doing wrong, nor in my view is it intrinsically sinful. It is faith seeking understanding. If God rules the world, and if God is the God of justice and compassion, as we affirm that he does and is, why does he permit such evil to persist? Such protest, in other words, is not a denial of God's sovereignty, let alone of God's existence. Rather, it assumes the sovereignty and goodness of God. And on that foundation is bold to hold up before God the realities of our lives that seem to contradict and undermine that very foundation. Protest to God is also protest for God. That is, it emerges from a passionate concern for God's name to be vindicated in the midst of all that slanders it. The voice of protest firmly believes that the judge of all the earth will do right, but longs for reassurance that ultimately he will indeed do so, unmistakably and visibly. In the meantime, and this is where we live in time, in the meantime, the struggle goes on, right? In the meantime, the struggle goes on, and the protesting questions remain. That is the essence of biblical lament. It is faith struggling with vertigo over the chasm between what it knows to be true about God and the realities of what it sees or experiences in this fallen world. So lament is trying to hold on that God's good, right? We sung these beautiful songs earlier about a perfect God and a Father God. So lament is still believing that that's God, but it's recognizing and being honest and saying, what I'm experiencing or what I'm seeing around me doesn't make sense if you're really that God, because it's too painful. What comes out in Lamentations is that the people knew they had messed up, and it comes out in funny ways. It's like, we know we sinned, but this much, God? Like, we know we're all sinners. We know we messed up, but this? You know, my child over here with his tongue sticking to his upper mouth with this, God? So lament is saying, I'm trying to hold on. I have faith, but that seems a long way from the real pain that won't go away in my life or that I see. And I'm trying to work this out, but I'm going to have to call you on it, God. Because I trust you, I'm going to have to yell. I'm going to have to cry, and I'm going to have to groan, God, to work this out. And I'm going to have to let you know about it, God, because I want to make sure you see this. Is that making some sense? I guess so I have to cry out. If I think God is real and I see this, I have to yell. And I have to scream, and I have to cry, and I have to say, somebody look at this, and God look at this. Because it's not okay. Everything is not okay. One of the things that comes out in Lamentations, and their situation is different than ours, right? So you can't draw a complete parallel to Jerusalem and what they went through to us. It's different. You can't say Jerusalem is the United States, and you can make some weird parallels there that would just go off the deep end, okay? But they went through pain. And one of the things you'll notice in Lamentations is it's almost an embarrassment or a shame or a vulnerability, like, this happened to us? God, this is happening to us? We're your, we've tried, to us, God? And almost an embarrassment. This happened to us? And I think you and I feel that sometimes, like, God, our family, this is happening to? Our country, this is happening to? I'm almost embarrassed to cry out because I don't want to admit that this has happened to me, right? To my son, to my father, to my city, I don't even want to admit that it's happening. But they had to wrestle with, to us, God, to Jerusalem, this is happening. They were vulnerable and they were ashamed. So the question I want to wrestle with for a moment is, why is lament hard for us? Because I know it's hard for me to dwell on it. I can look at it for a minute, but then I want to hop back to, a fun thing, quick. Why is it hard for us to lament? I was researching lament. It's interesting. Some countries and people groups that are in war-torn countries or poverty for generations, lament becomes a part of the normal Christian liturgy. It just becomes a normal part of what you sing when you're together, right? If you grew up in a town in a third world country and there's war and famine, and you believe in God, you're going to come together with your friends and you're going to sing, right, songs of lament. It's natural. So you can look through history. You can look at American slave songs, and there's this rich history of songs of lament as a normal part of worship. It's just a part of worship is lament. But sometimes we, who live in slightly safer places and situations, There is pain and there is brokenness. I'm going to talk about that for all of us. But we can at least kind of pretend it's not there for a while. Does that make sense? We can kind of come to worship and see our friends at the coffee shop and at least pretend we don't have to do a song of lament. We can kind of keep it at arm's distance a little bit. I had this story, this thing happened to me that for whatever reason God used to speak to me of how we're all broken and we all need to lament. So I live in East Oakland, and I can kind of get a little bit of an attitude, which can be good or bad, that I know a lot of people who are deeply hurting in a way that not all of my friends understand. There's some violence, young men I know who are literally worried about being shot, like this week. So that feels special to me, and I try to lament that. And sometimes I can get in this naive way, well, other people are okay, but these guys got it bad. And I started coaching. A while ago I preached, and I told a joke about my son playing basketball. So I started coaching to remedy that joke. And I coach his AAU team. Got to run into Irv walking out of the gym the other day. And so I'm coaching his team, and like a third of the team is from Oakland, kids that I know who are going through stuff, and maybe 2/3 is from Alameda. And I live right there. I don't even know Alameda. I'm getting used to it. So, and I kind of had this thing, oh, the kids from Alameda are okay. Like they're doing fine. They got nice, cool Victorians in Alameda, and they got 2 parents, and they're fine. And I had this day I was coaching, and my son Chase, some of you know, this little blonde guy, he loves basketball, and he has a buddy who, it's funny, they're almost identical, except his buddy has way darker skin and hair than him. And they're like the same size, and they both love basketball, they both love their gear, and they both have great attitudes, and they're both a little short for their age. And I love them both, and my son and him are buddies. And this other kid, and they even both have cool hair that they're really into. Like they're like mirror images of each other, these 2 kids. And so I love this kid. Like he's one of my favorites, I'll admit it. He's one of my favorites. And we're in the middle of practice in Alameda, and I'm like, okay, I'm leaving East Oakland, all the brokenness. I'm in Alameda now, it's fine. In the middle of practice, he makes a pass, and I say, and it kind of gets stolen. I say something about, oh, you could have faked a pass, and he just starts weeping. This kid just starts weeping. I mean, just crying in the middle. Oh, gosh, this kid, I just love this kid, and he's crying. And so I'm like, hey, and I think, was I mean? Like, did somebody hit him in the face on accident? Like, are you okay? And he can't stop crying. He's just crying. So I run over there, and I'm like, I don't know what to. I had no assistant coach that day, so I'm like, water break, everybody. I'm like, hey, can you tell me, are you okay? And he couldn't talk. He's just crying. This is like the middle of practice. He's been fine. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do. And I look up, and his dad's over there, and I know his dad, so I take him, I'm like, I don't know, I don't think I did anything. Like, I wasn't me, I don't know what happened. He said, okay, just let him, can he sit with you? Sits through, so in practice, I run over there, hey, is he okay? Like, I care about that guy. Like, and he just looks at me, his dad, in full honesty, and just says, we're having a rough week, Nate. Like, his mom moved out on Tuesday, and we're divorcing, and he just doesn't know, like, it's all broken, like, it's all messed up. And I had this moment, like, sitting with him, and this boy is still crying. Like, he's still crying, this guy. And this moment of, like, we are all broken. You know what I mean? Like, it's not East Oakland is broken, everything else is okay. It's not that it's fine in Alameda, or fine in Alamo, or fine in Walnut Creek, or it used to be fine in the 50s, right? Like, we are broken people. Are you with me? Like, we are broken, and we live in a world that's imperfect, and it's broken. And if you open your eyes, there's just people who are hurting, and there's pain, and if you'll admit it, there's just brokenness everywhere. And there's death, and there's dying, and there's divorce, and there's little boys who are crying who don't know what to do in the middle of their basketball practice. And they're sobbing, and their coach has no idea what to do, so their coach starts sobbing in a sermon much later. So as we look at lament, I know many of you, and I know there's a maturity and a spirituality that I appreciate here. And I know that a lot of you know that we have to face the brokenness in ourselves, right? In our families, in our church, in our people that we know. But I want to stretch you with Lamentations and challenge you a little bit with Lamentations. That what they're lamenting here is they're lamenting as a community, as a people group, as a country, right? As a large group, they're lamenting together. And I want to challenge us that might be a little bit of a stretch for us to think of lament that way. Their idea of life was more communal than ours in that context. They thought of life together, our people, our tribe, right? We're in this together. And even as they talk about sin, which is a whole other topic I'm not getting into that much today, as they talk about sin, that we sinned. It wasn't, oh, those young people sinned, Or, oh, those guys that just came in here recently, they didn't worship right. It's, no, we messed up, and we're facing this together. It's a communal sense of lamenting. So I want to stretch us to think about lamenting both for the family and the friends that we need to lament for, but also for the bigger things around us, for our city, for our state, for our country, for our world, the things that we need to lament and cry out to God about instead of ignoring. I got to take a little vacation last week, and we would come back in the hotel, and there was only a few channels, and sometimes, we'd do something, and we'd come back, and I would just turn on the TV for 3 minutes, while Andrea was getting ready to go to dinner, and I would turn on the TV, and every time, I was like, are you kidding me? That just happened yesterday? I just went on the beach for a few minutes, and I turned on the TV, and something else horrible happened. I'm going to go to the next news channel. Well, the next news channel is anger about somebody else that they don't like, and they're yelling, and everything's bad. So you go to the next channel, and in the sports world, there was an awful thing. It's just you just look for a minute at what's happening, and there are these things, and it's what do you do with that? Do you just say, oh, whatever, it's all going to burn, later, hopefully God will save it, or do you let it hurt? What do you do with that? And I think Lamentations gives us a lens, a practice of here's how we can face those kinds of things. So I'm going to show a slideshow in just a moment, not yet in a moment, a slideshow. And this was hard for me to make, but I want to lead us in a practice of groaning out to God about the things wrong with the world, okay? And not just being mad about it, and as we do this, not jumping to blame someone. My tendency is to jump and talk about how do we fix it. That's what I like to do really quickly. Well, how do we fix that? What do we do systematically to fix that so it's more just? But not to blame, not to but just to lament. Can we do that? Not overanalyze, well, that happened because of this group, and if they just had done this, this would have, but just to lament that there's pain. Does that make sense? Just to lament. Later we can analyze, later we can try to fix it, but just to look at something broken and to lament as a church body. So we're going to look at a picture, and actually I'm not going to make us groan visibly, but I would like to say, Lord, together we groan. Can we do that? So let's practice with me. So ready? Lord, together we groan. And I think there's something beautiful about, not by yourself, but as a community of saying, we groan about these things, God. We don't know what to do, but we can lament the way they lamented here. So I'm not, and actually, I know there's some younger people. I'm not going to go into details, actually, like I was. I'm just going to say just simply something about what happened. You can fill in the blanks from your news stories if you want, but I'm not going to go into details about what happened. I'm just going to say something tragic happened here in this country, okay? And then we'll say, Lord, together we groan. So, first slide. This is a priest in France who was killed recently. So here we go. Lord, together we groan. Next slide. This is in Japan. A horrific thing happened to a care unit for people with disabilities, and many were killed in Japan. So let's say, Lord, together we groan. This next slide is Turkey. There was an attempted coup while I was on vacation, and many people died, many people went to jail, and there is much turmoil that is happening to a whole people group right now. So let us say, Lord, together we groan. The next slide, this is France, where a truck drove into a crowd, and many people died in a terrible, terrible act. Let's say together, Lord, together we groan. This next picture is Sudan. There was some terrible war that broke out really recently, and many, many people were killed. So let's say together, Lord, together we groan. This next picture is of 5 police officers who were killed in Dallas, Texas. So let us say, Lord, together we groan. This next picture is Philando Castile, who was killed in Minnesota. Let us say, Lord, together we groan. The next picture is Alton Sterling, who died in Louisiana. Let us say, Lord, together we groan. Next picture is in Baghdad, Iraq, where a truck exploded. Let us say, Lord, together we groan. Next picture is of people who died in a nightclub in Orlando very recently. Let us say, Lord, together we groan. This next picture is different, and I will say nothing about this. It wouldn't be proper. But just to say, many people I know are angry or scared or hurting or angry at their friends or at someone with this whole season of election. Would that be okay, fair to say? Many people that I know are. So let us say, Lord, together we groan. This next picture is harder for me. I was going to have a picture saying urban violence. In places like East Oakland in the summer, violence spikes. Violence spikes in the summer in a big way. This was a guy that played in a basketball league that I run, and I just knew him a little bit, but I since then have become good friends with almost all of his good friends. So throughout the year I open up Facebook or Instagram, and whenever it's his birthday or whenever there's a basketball tournament or whenever it was the anniversary of when he was shot and killed on his porch, and actually the block right behind my block in the summer on a Saturday, young men throughout the year lament in their own way on Instagram and Facebook for their friend Maceo, who everyone loved him. Everyone just absolutely loved him, and he was about to go to have a scholarship, and he was shot and killed and left his daughter behind. So let us say, Lord, together we groan. This next slide can cover a lot of things, but as I get older and have friends who are getting older, and my parents, I realize how diseases cause so much pain to us, don't they, in our world? Cancer and many, many others. But I'm guessing we all know somebody who is dealing with in a tragic, terrible way, a painful way, an illness. And with all of our advancements, we can't stop these things yet. So let us say, Lord, together we groan. Let's go to the next slide. It was fascinating to me. I was putting those slides together, and it was very hard for me. I did not enjoy it. And in the middle of it, I was looking at news stories, and one of the headlines said, and I like basketball, it talked about the Cavaliers win the championship. And I had this urge inside me that I could make a really funny joke by saying that it's tragic the Warriors lost, and it would be funny, and I know I could make it let everyone laugh, and I could put it in the middle of the slides, and it would just break up the feeling, right? It would just break it up for a minute, and it would feel okay. And I really had this wrestling sitting at my desk for like 15 minutes. And I realized I had such a strong pull to not sit in the lament. Can you identify with that? I didn't want to stay stuck here anymore. I wanted to bring a little something to distract me for a minute in the middle of the pictures. Like this it was a strong pull to just get out of the lament for a minute. And so I didn't put it in, obviously. But I say that to say, I think for some of us, it's hard to sit in the lament for a while. We rush to the next step before lamenting long enough. And Lamentations is 5 chapters like the chapter I read, except for a little bit in 3 and a little bit at the end of 5. And it crescendos in 3 to this, okay, but God is good, it is okay, and then it goes right back. But just so we're also clear, here's what happened to us for another couple chapters. I think it's hard for us to sit in that. So what I'd like to do, and we're going to close in just a moment after this silent prayer time, so if the worship team wants to get ready, but I just want to have a minute or two for you to lament silently, to take the moment to lament about your own life, family, friends, and about the world, and to say, look, Lord, I'm groaning, we're hurting. Can you look at this, God? I am crying out to you, believing that you're good, but I'm going to take a couple minutes and pour it out to you and yell and cry to you silently. So would you just close your eyes for a moment? And whatever it is that is coming to your mind to speak out to God, would you just put it out to God? He can take it. Yell silently, cry silently, address the broken parts of our world to God and cry out and say, God, would you just look at this? Can you just tell me that you see this, please, God? I'll give you a minute or two of silence to do that. Lord, together we groan, God. We cry out. We're tired of this. We're tired of pain, and we're tired of war, and we're tired of cancer. We're tired of division. We're tired of pain. And God, we just ask, would you see us? God, look at us. See the pain. God, acknowledge us. Turn your eyes to us. God, would you hear our groans? And God, give us the strength and the courage to sit in this lament for a minute, God. Today, this week, whatever it is, God, would you give us the courage we need to sit with the lament and to face the evil and pain and to acknowledge it, not pretend it's not there, and to cry out to you. Not even knowing what it'll do or what'll happen, but can we just cry out to you, God, and ask that you would see us, ask that you would see the things that are wrong around us, God. God, we love you, and we're trying to trust you, trying to believe you, trying to trust in your goodness. Would you help us, God? And we pray this all in the name of Jesus. Amen.